Well, hi everybody. I'm Michael Mandel, and this is something that is new for CompStack. This is the second time we've done it. We internally have been calling it the Not Podcast. I don't know if that's gonna stick, but we kind of like it. We're just talking to people in the industry to talk a little bit about data, about commercial real estate, and get some interesting insights to share with the world. And maybe shamelessly plug CompStack just a little bit, along the way. So today, I should probably introduce myself. I'm Michael Mandel. I'm CompStack's CEO, and we are a commercial real estate data company focusing on lease and sales transaction data, property information, loan data, and things like that. And Josh is here from FTI Consulting. So Josh Herrenkohl, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here. And, so my name is Josh Herrenkohl, as Michael mentioned. I'm with FTI Consulting. I'm a senior managing director. I've been with FTI for just about 4 years. I was at EY for almost 25 years prior. I played a number of different roles. I led the real estate consulting business globally for a number of years in the US as well. Data and technology is a big topic. It's been a big part of my focus over the course of my career, and really thrilled to be here to talk a little bit more about it.
Awesome. Well, why don't we start with a little more background on specifically what you do and what FTI does?
Yeah. So FTI is a global firm. So we're in 34 countries. I think we're up to now about 8,000 people. So it's a consulting firm that does a lot of different things. With that said, real estate's one of our two largest industry segments, and so real estate gets a ton of attention within our firm. We've got a large practice of dedicated practitioners, and then we've got a number of folks who spend part of their time in the real estate industry. So our cyber team, for example, they work across industries, but a fair bit of their time they spend focused in the real estate in the sector. Within our real estate group, I always think about it as 4 food groups, right? So we've got our strategy and transactions business, which is valuations, financial modeling. We have an executive compensation team, business transformation, a number of different sort of areas, focused either on sort of helping clients around their strategy or their transactions, right? When transactions are a little more fluid than perhaps they are today.
Yep.
So that's kind of the one area. We've got a restructuring team, a dedicated real estate restructuring team. FTI is...
They may be a little more busy today.
They are a little bit more busy. That's absolutely true. FTI is actually the largest restructuring advisor in the world, right? And so not just real estate, but across all industries. So we've got a dedicated real estate restructuring team. We've got a dedicated real estate tax team, and then we've got a fund admin / outsourced accounting business within real estate. So we do a lot of partnering with other areas outside of real estate. I should mention we're a user of CompStack, as you know.
Yep,
we're a big fan of the technology, of the tool. It's been a huge help in our business, and as we talk about data, just a great source of accurate data, right? We'll get into that a little bit more, but just being able to tap into one more source of data that we know is going to be pretty close to accurate is phenomenal.
Awesome. And could you speak a little bit more specifically about what you do day to day and how that impacts this work?
Yeah, so I lead our sort of 2 groups. So I lead our real estate business transformation area, and then I co-lead what we call our investment administration and reporting business. So business transformation, as you might imagine, is everything to do with the kind of the operating model of a real estate company. So focused on process, technology, data, and then org design. And then the second area, investment administration and reporting, is really it's accounting managed services and then other tangential managed services. And so we'll talk a little bit about what that means, but broadly speaking, data and accounting are obviously integrally sort of intertwined. And so a lot of times what we will focus on is helping clients with an end-to-end solution. We'll help to transform their middle and back office, and then we will effectively manage the process by which they're ingesting data, moving that data through what I call the data supply chain, So basically the ingesting of data if they're working with third-party property managers or joint venture partners, validating that data, helping clients to really sort of ensure the accuracy of the data, and then ultimately helping them with their books and records, right? So kind of helping them through that process. I also, as a senior managing director, get involved in other areas of our business, and we've got clients who tap into us for valuations or financial modeling or whatever else, and obviously, I get involved with those types of assignments as well.
Got it. So it sounds like it's maybe mostly what we thought of as back office, but some of it's front office as well.
Yeah, I mean, as a practice, we do. I mean, my focus is more, kind of quote unquote, back office or middle office. We've got a team who spends most of their time on the front office, helping with due diligence, valuations, right? Sort of what might be in the transactions or asset management arena.
Well, and the data is all interrelated, right? Like
it is, right? Yeah.
Maybe it starts front office, becomes back office, goes back to front office again when you're selling the asset or repositioning it, and it has to work, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's so. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, this topic of data, right? I think in one sense, it's a mundane topic, data, right? We've been talking about it for years, but it really is, it's the lifeblood, I think, of our industry, right? Because you can't make a decision without having access to data that is accurate. If you're going to go out and you're going to buy a office property, you need to have data to be able to understand all the fundamentals to be able to make the decision not only of whether or not I should buy it, but what's the right and appropriate price, right, and price point to purchase that property. And so, I think maybe even more so than most industries, we are heavily reliant on data. But I think the irony, right, to me, is that perhaps maybe relative to many industries, the data, generally speaking, is worse off, right, than what you might find in other industries.
Why do you think that is?
Well, I think it's a few reasons. I think one is that it's a very decentralized, fragmented industry. Even the largest players, right, typically are not vertically integrated, right? So if you've got, the largest real estate investment manager in the world, they're still reliant on joint venture partners, on property managers. And so if you think about the data that they're rolling up for both their financial and non-financial reporting, it's data that's coming from the property level that probably is being managed by a third party, right? So I think there's that fragmentation aspect. I think another reason is a lack of standards, right? I think there have been a number of attempts at standards, Oscar and other organizations who've tried to bring consistency around kind of the standardization within the industry. I think it's been, moderately successful at best, right? I think the other is that, real estate almost by its nature is, sort of a middle market business, right? If you look at the Fortune 500, you have to dig pretty deep until you get to a real estate company, and you're probably even then, looking at a services company, right? So to actually get to an asset manager, an investment manager, an owner, there's not that many, right? And so it's a lot of kind of smaller middle market type business.
It's funny when you think about it, when you consider how large of an asset class it is, right? So, largest, or second largest asset class in the world, and yet the players aren't that big comparatively, right?
Yeah, well, that's true, but I think you also have to look at, if you look at commercial real estate, if you look at it as an asset class, it's massive, right? Because, homes, single-family homes get sort of thrown into that bucket. Only 2.5% of single-family homes are institutionally owned.
Sure.
So even within the context of investment properties, a lot of those are owned by mom and pop shops or middle market players. And again, I just go back to the point that it's very, very decentralized, very fragmented. You don't find mega.
And there's a massive long tail, right? So many individuals who own assets, even commercial assets. The classic sort of like retired doctor, lawyer, whatever, who owns an interest in a shopping center or something like that.
Yeah.
And you're not even working with those guys. But the challenges are throughout the industry, right, from top to bottom, as it relates to making sense of all this. So how do you help them do that? How do you fix that level of decentralization, fragmentation in data and in platforms that are used, and lack of consistency of any standards.
Yeah. Well, look, I think, one of the ways is we partner with technologies like Comstack, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we've got relationships with many organizations out in the industry who I think have really done a phenomenal job in terms of really raising the bar in terms of data management, accuracy of data, et cetera. So, but I think, I go back to really what I think about as, I don't know, take the challenge I mentioned before around the ingestion of data, right? This has been a topic we've been talking about for decades.
Yeah.
And it's one that there hasn't really been like a silver bullet that has really sort of helped to solve that issue. So, one of the things that we do with our clients is, I go back to my term, the data supply chain, right? We'll either do the whole process or we'll plug in at individual processes, but just the process of like pulling data in. So let's say that you've got a global investment manager. They may be working with 100, 200, 300 plus, right? Third parties, property managers and joint ventures.
Yeah.
Some of those are going to really do a really good job at managing accounting, managing the operations, the leasing, and being able to provide accurate and appropriate data, right? But the reality is, if you look at any portfolio, it's probably maybe a third, right, of a third to a half of the portfolio that really is trustworthy data, right? And then you've got this 50+% where the data really can't be trusted. And so part of what we do, we've got, we work with technology partners. We also have some proprietary technologies, help to manage the ingestion of that data, the validation of that data. And then we've got, technical experts. So we may actually go in and do validation of the accounting, right? To look at the accuracy, the completeness, and whether a journal entry was booked appropriately at the property level. We'll then, manage that process on through, again, doing fund accounting or, corporate accounting. We also help clients with standalone issues and initiatives. So we may help clients, not in the context of a managed service, but rather, helping them with, on a consulting basis. We'll go in for, 2-3 months, help them to really identify and prioritize their issues and help them to resolve and remediate those issues.
And do you help them work with their JV partners to improve this process on an ongoing basis? Because it seems like, okay, great, you've helped them clean up the data that they have at hand right now, maybe try to make sense of one particular issue, but then they go do 10 more deals and that issue just repeats itself. How do you build something that's repeatable so that this doesn't continue to be an ongoing challenge for them?
Yeah, that's a great question, a great point. So part of what we embed in is really kind of a governance, training, and sort of standardization process up front, right? So we may identify, we may go through and do a risk assessment and say, all right, 10% of parties are responsible for 65% of the issues, right? We may sort of flag those third parties to say, all right, let's do some training, some standardization, put together some manuals, right, to really help them to raise the bar in terms of how they're providing data, submitting data, and really sort of operating as a partner to our client, right? The challenge that you point to is nothing is static. And so no large investment manager just has a series of properties that they don't buy or sell. So you go and you dispose of 10 properties, you buy 20, and suddenly now you may have in your portfolio new property managers or joint venture partners that you didn't have before, that suddenly now you have to go through the whole process again, right? So it's really around trying to standardize and build a governed process, but also build training and help companies to really think about how they push out into the marketplace, the expectations that they have. It's a challenge because, and sometimes there's sort of a tension between the back office and the front office, right? If you're working with a joint venture partner, the deal guys are saying, we want to be seen as a really easy to work with investment manager because we want you to source, we want you to bring the next deal. And so therefore, sometimes there's that tension, right? The front office, the folks in the front office are saying, look, let's not sort of force too much of our requirements on the third parties because they're focused on getting the next deal.
Interesting. So you've got the back end, the friction there. That's interesting. And I guess, is there a lot of software at play that has made it easier to do this going forward? Are there standards that people are getting comfortable with, or is it not really changing and you just have to deal with it?
My own personal view, I think we've made incremental change. I think there are some good technologies out in the marketplace. I think we could do better, right? As an industry, I think that the amount of change that has sort of taken place across the industry, I think, again, it's improved. It's gotten better. I think about when I started in the industry, 20 plus years ago, it was really kind of the Wild West. Today, it's better, but maybe not as much better as you might expect, given 20 years of time. What are you guys seeing? I mean, you guys obviously, you're as much a data company as anything else. Are you seeing an improvement, an increase in terms of the level of standardization, the accuracy, and so forth?
Not at all. No, we crowdsource data and we get it from lots of different sources. The data we're bringing in primarily from brokers, also appraisers and research people and brokerage firms. It's mostly comp data and property data related to those comps, so lease comps and sales comps. And, we get it in Word documents and PDFs and Excel spreadsheets and, in the body of an email. And, I suppose probably the percentage of data that we get in that comes out of some system from a brokerage firm, let's say, is maybe higher than it used to be. I can't say that empirically, but I believe that's likely the case. But no, it's largely been the same. I guess one thing we've seen is more of our own data being returned to us. We're like, this data looks really clean. Something must be wrong with it. Oh, it's ours.
Do you have that challenge a lot where people are so, it's almost like loyalty points, right? You go and you stay at a hotel and you want the loyalty points. They want the credits, right? Do you have that problem where people are submitting data that either is regurgitated data or maybe not?
Not often. If somebody's intentionally trying to game the system, we normally catch it pretty early and we let kick those people off the platform or let them know that we might be onto them. But some of it is just the nature of the way the industry works. It's not necessarily intentional, right? Like people pull some comps down from CompStack, they share them with colleagues. Those colleagues think that they're unique data. They don't realize it's from CompStack, and so they submit it to CompStack.
Right.
So it's not necessarily the case that it's anyone intentionally trying to game the system. It's just a function of the way this industry works. And what's somewhat unique about what we've done is that we've engineered our entire business model based off of the way that the kind of broken system works, rather than trying to fix the system. So we haven't said, okay, no, everybody has to comply to a standard, or everybody's going to do this way. We said, okay, just keep doing whatever you're doing. We'll deal with it, right?
Yeah.
Just send us the data. We'll figure it out.
Right.
And the fact that we've done that, I think, has been a testament, to the growth we've had, is that we have let people continue to do what they're doing. That's not to say that it wouldn't be better if things were more normalized and straightforward. I think that we've certainly seen improvement in the way in which our clients manage their own data, which is a testament to the work that you do and others that like you are doing to help these guys make sense of their data internally. And that increases the demand for market data, because once you've made sense of your own data internally, then you want to understand how you're performing against your peers. But you can't really do that effectively until you've made sense of your own data internally. And I think that another meaningful shift we've seen is that, when we started the company, it was primarily about getting access to the data on the CompStack platform, people logging in and searching for the specific deals they want an analyst using it to underwrite a loan or to underwrite an investment opportunity, very granularly and specifically related to that data, and not as much, a research team or a data science team trying to make sense of data holistically for an organization. And that's been changing for sure. Every day there's more and more organizations that are trying to leverage their data as a whole and understand what's happening in the market and what's happening, in completeness across their portfolio and various portfolios, and understand their performance. And that wasn't happening as much, but we're still really in early days there. The level of sophistication as it relates to data science teams is quite early. And the research teams have been around, obviously, for a long time. And they're certainly working with larger and larger data sets than they have in the past as well. So that's interesting too. And also interesting to see sort of the juxtaposition between traditional research and data science and how they do or don't work together. Ideally, they work very closely together because data science without real estate expertise is kind of useless.
Right.
But what are your thoughts in that regard? I mean, how do you think about this juxtaposition between internal data and market data and how that comes together?
Yeah. Well, I mean, a couple of things. One is, it always amazes me the level of opaqueness of data in the industry, right? I mean, to your point, one of, if not the largest asset classes, and the hoops that we have to jump through just to get data that we think is accurate, maybe or not 100%, right? Maybe we're 98%. Yeah. I mean, I think that it's interesting because I always think there's this concept of the haves and the have-nots, right? And I think it's increasing, maybe to some respect, the wrong direction, to say that the larger you are, the more of your own data ecosystem you have that you can rely on, right? If you're the largest real estate investment manager out in the industry, you've got vast amounts of data. You can do your own internal benchmarking.
Sure.
And you don't have to rely on, or not substantially rely on, external market data to the extent that if you were a $500 million fund manager that you would. And so the whole concept of democratization, I think, is an interesting one in real estate because I think, in large part there is value, right, with an ecosystem of more players rather than fewer players, or more players rather than a small number of players that are controlling the massive amounts of data. But I think perhaps we're going in the wrong direction, right? I also think that there is a huge opportunity for disruption in our industry. If you think about, it's a somewhat insular industry in the sense that there's a known set of players. I mean, you kind of know this, I'm sure, from being in the industry for a long time. You kind of know everybody, right? I think that there's I don't know if I want to call it an opportunity, but an opportunity, somewhere between an opportunity and a risk of, a third-party player outside of the industry coming and really making a significant change within the industry that people are not necessarily ready or prepared for. So I think, I don't know, I feel like you got to keep your knees bent a little bit.
Really? I haven't necessarily bought into that as much. Well, I won't name the company, but there was certainly a company that we were working with that was trying to get into the real estate space that had good success within the private equity space. And I remember the way they were just thinking about the way they architectured their data and the way they were making sense of it. And I was just like, this doesn't make sense for real estate. Like, there was just such a learning curve for them to, they just thought because they had success in the private equity space that they would therefore have the same level of success within real estate. And I don't know to what extent they're having success or not, but it certainly felt like they were trying to, for a while, just replicate the model that worked, and they had to come to the realization that wasn't gonna play out, and bring in a good level of expertise and bring in the right people, and which they did bring in people from the industry, and they were trying to figure it out. But there's definitely a learning curve. So maybe you're right. Maybe they do these firms do come in and have success, but I do think there's a learning curve.
There's no question.
You
Look,
know.
I'm totally with you that I think that generally speaking, historically, whenever a non-real estate player is coming to the real estate industry, their Achilles heels, they think it's like everything else. We see this in the fund admin space where many of the fund admins who came in, they just assumed it was going to be like private equity and like hedge funds. And as we know, it's a totally different animal.
Right.
Maybe there's some similarities to private equity, but you don't have that property level. And so I'm not suggesting that it's an easy sort of thing to accomplish, but as you start to think about advanced technologies and new technologies, my only point is I think you need to have your knees bent, because I think the expectation traditionally has been that my competitive set is someone that I know within the industry, when in fact, if someone does it right and correctly, perhaps it's going to actually be someone outside of the industry. I don't know how it's going to play out, and it's one of those things like, if you predicted the 2008 crash, right? You you were a hero, but maybe it's one of those things that won't actually come to fruition. But my view is that as it becomes a bigger and bigger commercialized industry, there's more and more opportunity. There's more money to be made by an external entrant to come in and really think about how to do things a little bit differently.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was thinking about, maybe not exactly the angle you were thinking about, but one firm that comes to mind for me right now is Faro Point in the industrial space, where they're an upstart within industrial investment, but they've used a very data science forward approach to the way they make their investment decisions, where they underwrite everything in an automated fashion, and then their analysts they have analysts working on these deals, but they need to seek special approval to underwrite a deal that is beyond a certain threshold from what their algorithms will tell them they should underwrite it at. And they grew very, very rapidly over the past few years, leveraging data science as a means for doing real estate underwriting. And it's been I don't know if I would say disruptive, but certainly innovative.
Yeah.
In the industrial real estate space, and I think you're going to see more of that. And I think these were people who understood real estate,
right,
but also really understood technology and think of themselves as really more of a technology company probably than a real estate company.
Right.
And that's interesting, because obviously, I mean, it seems like everybody says they're a technology company, but most who say that aren't really telling the truth.
Yeah. No, I think that's right. And look, I think also we talk about commercial real estate, or we talk about real estate generally. It's a vast, vast industry, and you bring up, industrial real estate, which is totally different than dealing with data centers, right? Which is totally different than dealing with multifamily, right? And I think about, in the context of multifamily, multifamily is probably the closest thing to kind of, and retail, but those two have very direct interactions with the end consumer, right? And so you think about just the kind of the CRM technology needs, requirements. There's a big need, I think, that's there. So some of our clients, for example, that are in the multifamily space, they're saying, look, we can't find the technology that we need within the industry, so we're going to build it ourselves. Is that terribly efficient for all of the different multifamily or single family players to be building their own technology? I think we'd all agree the answer is no.
Right.
So the question is, again, is someone going to tackle that issue? Can someone develop and build a better mousetrap and monetize it? Or is there perhaps something that's a mirror type scenario from outside the industry that can come in and really kind of create an opportunity that didn't exist before?
And that's something you help your clients with, right? Is understanding when they should build versus buy, and who they might want to partner with to solve some of these problems?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we do a lot of work with, really kind of helping clients with the strategy around their operating model, right? To think about what should it look like, what's the best use in terms of their investment dollars. They want to get to X. Is getting 90% to X sufficient? And if so, what's the trade-off in terms of the savings, right? Or just the lack of headache, or the fact that you don't have to create something, from scratch or anew. So we do a lot of that type of work with our clients. I think we have, we have a benefit. I think one of the differentiators relative to others that are out in the marketplace is we do managed services in the context of a broader consulting mindset, right? So we're very creative in terms of the way that we work. We don't have one model that we force our clients into in terms of, again, managed services around data, around accounting. We tend to be very creative and technology agnostic.
Got it. So you mentioned, the threat of, or maybe opportunity, obviously, of as well, of outsiders coming in and changing the way that the industry does what it does. What else do you see in the future of data within commercial real estate? Where do you see things going?
Yeah, look, I want to believe that we're heading in a path where there's going to be more transparency, less opaqueness. I think there are, first of all, there's some regulatory hurdles, right? You think about some of the data that's managed at the local level, like again, certainly in the multifamily or the single family space, the types of data that are very difficult to access. That I think there could be some reasonably easy changes that would be made that would just create a lot more democratization around data. I think, again, that if you look out 5 to 10 years, I think new technology is coming into the marketplace that you already see today. AI, right? Obviously, the big topic of today. I think that ultimately could have a significant impact and help to sort of close the gaps around some of these data issues. So I'm optimistic around what the future holds, but we'll see, right?
Let's dig into the AI part of that. We'll try not to dig too deep so that we don't sound like everybody else talking heads about AI. But where do you see more specifically AI, transforming the industry?
Yeah, I think AI. I mean, AI is a really interesting topic, right? Not just because it's interesting unto itself, but if you look at the history. I remember when I was a kid, there was effectively it was like early AI. It was called Eliza, right? And you could type a question. It was basically like it was a natural language process, early natural language processing AI, effectively, where you could ask it a question, it would give you some question, effectively almost like as a therapist, right? And here we are, decades later, and we're talking about AI, and in some respect, we're talking about many of the same kind of use cases around AI as well. I think the thing that's changed is, Gen AI, right? From my vantage point, I think that if we can get to a point, so let's say, for example, we've got a data set and we know that it's 70% accurate. Is there some way that we can use AI to really close that gap and identify and fill in the missing data without actually necessarily having access to the full data set, right? I think AI in the context, certainly on the residential side of the house, can be really transformative in terms of chatbots and being able to interact with with kind of end users and so forth. I think can be really interesting and will be interesting to sort of watch. And then AI, I think also in the back office, right? I think can be. Right. Is an interesting trend, I think, also because, so take waterfall models, right? Something that seemingly is pretty straightforward, but is extremely complex. And a lot of organizations really just sort of throw the towel and they say, we're going to use Excel, right? Right. So the question is, can we get to a place where we're able to run complex models, complex algorithms, but do it in a bespoke way that doesn't necessarily have the rigidity of some of the technologies and tools that have been sort of within the industry to date. I don't know. I also think AI. Go back to my hypothesis around a sort of external third-party entrant. I think that there could potentially be applications of AI that are not necessarily built and designed specifically for real estate that come into the industry that end up really being transformative.
Right. Do you think in these cases where we're talking about modeling, or the like, does AI displace a lot of jobs within the back office or front office? Are we going to lose a lot of analysts that are digging into this data and replacing them with robots?
Yeah. I don't personally think that's like imminent. 20, 25 years, who knows, right? It's anybody's guess. But, my view is that it's really raising the bar in terms of the type of work that people are doing, right? So, I think it also potentially impacts like the outsourcing market as well, because, if you think about all of the activities that take place within a real estate company on any given day, what percentage of them are actually truly analytical in terms of thinking through the process and coming up with a unique answer based on real thought and collaboration and so forth? I don't know, 10%, 15%, maybe 20%.
Right.
Right. And then you've got this like middle tier of activities, let's call it another 30%. And then you've got like 50%, which are transactional processes. They're things that you and I could literally sit down and write code for that are just repeatable,
Sure.
right? They're predictable. If X, then Y. Those are the things that I think ultimately get automated, right? And what's interesting to me is like outsourcing has been around for decades. I'm seeing a lot more, or I should say offshoring, right? Offshoring has been around for decades. I'm seeing a lot more offshoring and interest in offshoring today, in large part because I think organizations, large and small, are realizing that a lot of those activities that are really not value added can be sent offshore. I think those are the activities that are going to be initially sort of displaced through technology. So suddenly the entire organization, if you've got someone sitting in New York City, you're raising the bar in terms of what activities they're actually performing. I think it's going to be a lot more of those thought-provoking types of things where perhaps today it's less than 50%, maybe eventually it's 80, 90%, right? And the rest of it is done through technology.
Right. Well, then the interesting challenge, of course, is that the people doing the high-level work, the thought work, based in the U.S., they all grew up in the industry doing the grunt work, right? If the grunt work is either replaced by AI or offshored, where do people grow up in the industry to get to be in those kind of roles where they can be making the decisions?
Yeah. Well, look, it's a question that I think obviously needs to get figured out. Part of it is better training, better education, more tailored. Perhaps you see more people who are going to graduate programs very specifically focused on analysis and sort of analytics and so forth. But I do agree with you, right? I'm a big fan of of kind of on the job training and getting people sort of embedded in something at the junior level, and they kind of grow into a more seasoned role. I don't know. Part of it, I'm an optimist. Maybe I think sort of takes care of itself, but it's definitely something that needs to be tackled over time. There's no question.
I tend to agree with you. I think though that these specialized programs, there's going to be more demand for them, and learning on the job will be less of an expectation, and you're going to have to come in being able to do, the higher level work, from the onset, perhaps, which I think is interesting.
Right. It's also interesting, I think, for, I think about the transformative aspect of video conferencing, something that's seemingly a very simple technology that was really sort of introduced en masse almost overnight with COVID. Today, and not every company has embraced this, but if you're in a small market, right? If you're in St. Louis or you're in Kansas City, right? Traditionally, you had to tap into the talent of people that were specifically in that market. Today, and again, not every organization sort of is okay with this, but theoretically, and someone could sit anywhere around the world as long as they're able to or willing to work in the time zone. And so I also think that perhaps there's more sort of decentralization in terms of employee pools and things that have already happened. I do think there's a downside to that as well. But I think about going back to like the offshoring point that we were talking about a minute ago. I think part of the reason that offshoring, has been sort of a big topic within the context of the industry today, in large part is due to video conferencing. Now it's, you can actually sort of look at someone and interact with them
Sure.
in a way that you couldn't before. So that's been very transformative. So look, my point I think is that sometimes seemingly simple, straightforward, not highly complex technologies sometimes can be very transformative in terms of the way that people work, companies work, organizations work, and that ultimately help us to leapfrog right from where we are today to somewhere different.
Absolutely. How about when you think about AI within the models that people are building to do their work? Are you guys building those for your clients? Are you helping them do it? And how do you think about that? And also sort of the black box nature of some of these things, right? Because that's the reality with Gen AI, right? Is you ask it a question, it gives you an answer, and you have no idea really how it arrived at that answer, right?
Yeah.
How do you think about that, and how do your clients feel about that?
Yeah. Well, the first part of the question is, FTI is investing a ton, right, into AI. So we've had folks that have been focused on AI sitting in different parts of the group. We have, not in real estate specifically, but there's a whole e-discovery group. FTI is one of the leading e-discovery groups. We have a whole group that's focused on antitrust. And technology and AI have been part of the technology that's been used. And so what FTI has done is they've brought, really the thought leaders around AI together to form a very single cohesive approach to how we take AI out to our clients, agnostic of the solution. And so I think that's been, and will continue to be, a huge sort of thing that we're able to help and support our clients in a way that I think will be really interesting. I think the black box question, I think, is one of the biggest things that we need to tackle, right, with AI. And the whole concept, right, as you were sort of mentioning, is something goes in one side, it comes out the other side. Do we trust it? And I don't think we're there yet, honestly. There's still a lot of just, if you type something in the chat GPT, maybe 80% of it's going to be correct, maybe 70%. Who knows,
Sure.
right? I mean, actually have to go back and fact check. And that's in a commercial real estate context, that's not acceptable, right?
Sure.
I mean, I don't want to go out and buy an office building and I have no idea whether or not what the margin of error was or whether it was even accurate.
Yeah.
I think that's going to continue to increase. I think that part of the thing with AI is it's so dependent on the data that's fed in to train the AI, right?
100%.
And so, I mean, I think about Comstack, right, and what you guys are doing, technologies that are able to bring better, more accurate, highly trustworthy data into the context of the ecosystem that effectively is the source of the food, the feed or the food that we send into the AI engine. Suddenly now we can trust it on the back end. If we're giving it all sorts of stuff that we're just we open it up to whatever's on the internet, there's all sorts of stuff out on the internet, right? So I think that's the future is a more defined ecosystem of data that's used to train AI, which ultimately generates better kind of results on the back end.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think there was an interview recently with Sam Altman, who founded OpenAI, and he was speaking about how when they trained it initially, they used the whole trove of the internet, of everything out there possible to make it work. But on an ongoing basis, that's not their intention. Mm-hmm. On an ongoing basis, it's to continue to train it using only highly credible sources. And so they're interested in using the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal and major publications that fact check their versus just broadly scraping the internet on a go-forward basis. And I think that speaks to that. Like, you needed all this information to allow it to be conversational in a reasonable way and have it understand sort of how to approach things. But then when it comes down to it, people want answers from credible data backing it up. And of course, when people ask me about that as it relates to Comstack, I'm very excited because we're very proud of having granular, credible data. Mm-hmm. And so we think we can power a lot of this. Although one thing that's been interesting is it seems like it's become a consistent theme now that we have clients, existing clients, new prospective clients, technology companies reaching out to us who want to use our data in new Gen AI models. And on the one hand, I'm very excited about it, and on the other hand, I'm a little scared.
Right.
What are you going to do with this? Who are you providing this to? Are you
Yeah.
keeping this internally or externally? How are you thinking about it? What happens if you combine our data with other data, provide people with a crappy result, and they think that it's because Comstack's data was wrong when in fact it wasn't, but because the Gen AI was hallucinating and leveraging other data sources with
Right.
it? Or what happens if they think the data is amazing and they don't realize that it's our data behind it? That's also something that's concerning to me. So
So what's your answer
what's my answer?
when they come?
Yeah, so far we haven't allowed any sort of external technology providers who are selling to anybody else to use our data in a model like that.
Right.
We are allowing our clients to use it internally with the caveat that they use it only within an environment that they control, so that the data is not being put into public ChatGPT and that kind of thing. And we're continuing to evaluate and think about how we do it. I think there's also the matter of how good can these models become when trained off this data? Can the models can someone use the data to train a fantastic model and then stop using the data and still have a successful model that was built on top of our data or anyone else's data for that matter, but you're no longer getting paid on that? I'm not as concerned about that because the market changes and the data changes, and just because you train something on that was successful off of old market data doesn't mean it's going to continue to be successful in the future.
Right.
But perhaps there's other proxies for seeing where things are going that it's different. I don't know. I think there's a lot to learn still.
Yeah.
So.
Well, it's interesting, right? I mean, the point you bring up is an interesting one. Who was it? It was the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times that sued, I think, OpenAI, right?
New York Times,
New York
I think.
Times.
Yeah.
And the thing that's very maybe it's obvious, but the reality is that it's a limitation to market entry, right? Data and the proprietariness of data, and if Comstack, if you guys basically opened up your data to provide to anyone who wanted it, suddenly it depletes the value of the product that you're offering out in the marketplace. But I think the flip side is that until we can get to a place where they're actually you're able to create a data soup of really good and accurate data, it's going to be hard, I think, to get to an end state where AI really can generate outputs and results that are truly trustworthy, right? So part of it, I think, is around it's around standards, it's around trust, it's around, but it's also about some I don't want to say regulatory, but at least some rules around the limitations on how data is used, how it's attributed back to the source, and compensation as well, right?
Yeah, it's tricky. I presume there will be a solution. I don't know that we saw an easy solution in the music industry, right? When Napster took off, and I'm dating myself now, I suppose, but but everybody was sharing music for free, and eventually, the industry reached an equilibrium of sorts, right? Where now Spotify has figured out how to compensate artists appropriately, although they don't make as much money as they used to with album sales. Now they make their money off of concerts and merch, unless you're Taylor Swift. But the industry seems to have figured something out, and I think that broadly, hopefully, we'll get it figured out, because there is value that content creators, should get for creating content, or else there's no incentive to create that content.
Right.
And but there's also great value in the information being free and the models becoming better, and it's great for humanity, in that regard. And trying to reach that balance is going to be a tricky one.
But is it that different? You have partners in the real estate industry, right, where you provide data into a feed where a client may then have a data warehouse, for example, right? that includes data from CompStack.
Yeah.
I guess the difference is in that situation, it's a model that basically is internal just to a single client as opposed to open to the public domain, right?
Right. Yeah. When it's internal use for a client, it's a lot easier to make sense of for us.
Right.
When it's a more of a reseller situation, it becomes trickier. And
Yeah.
and you know, also our model is, you know, not to go too far in the weeds, but our model is such that we have people who trade data on CompStack who can't pay for it. Right. We don't sell data to brokerage firms who do leasing. And so they have to give to get, because otherwise our concern is that if we let them buy it, that they'll no longer share it.
Right.
And so if if some technology company is using our data and effectively selling it back to the people who provide us with data, well, then we'll no longer get the data,
Right.
and then we're out of business.
Yeah.
So this is existential
Right.
for us.
Right.
We really need to have a real handle on where the data goes and who's buying it and how they're buying it
Right.
in order for it to work.
Yeah, it's kind of that circular loop, right? It has to work on both sides in order for the system to work.
Yeah. But of course, at the same time, we are getting data from the market,
Right.
and so we rely on people sharing data
Yeah.
more generally,
Right.
for the market to work. And so there's this push and pull because everybody wants to control data, even us. But sharing data is how you create efficient markets, and efficient markets create innovation, and that's a real opportunity, and that's really exciting.
Yeah.
So you don't want to stifle that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look, it's going to be really interesting. I think the next decade is going to has the potential to be really transformative in the industry. I think it's the question of, if you look at the prop tech, world, right? I mean, there have been thousands and thousands of technologies that sort of call themselves prop tech. The question is, which are the ones that are going to really be innovative in terms of their ability to be able to transform the market? I think there's going to be a lot that sort of fizzle out. But I'm really excited, really, just about the next 5, 7, 10 years, and seeing how things change and how the industry continues to evolve.
I agree. I think that's a great place to leave it.
Yeah.
This has been a lot of fun. Thank you for joining me and having this conversation.
Thank you for having me. It's been a ton of fun for me as well.
Awesome. Thanks.